Hey, good afternoon or good morning, class. I am actually it's afternoon, isn't it? Well, I am obviously not at school today, so wanted to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about what's going to happen next week. If you follow your calendars, as you should, you'll see that next class we have a major exam over the Colonial America unit. Okay, so, but I didn't want to have you go into the weekend not really knowing how the exam is structured, and maybe me give you some tips as to what you can do in order to prepare for the exam. Now, of course, first of all, today we just got through with a reading quiz. Now, the reading quizzes, we'll take those reading quizzes usually the class day before we have a major exam. And so for each unit that we study, okay, whoops, here we go. So for each unit that we study, there will be outside readings that will be required reading in this course. Now, the way that, we're going to talk about everything we do in APUS is for a reason. And that reason ultimately is to score well on the AP exam. And so the outside readings that are assigned per unit are essentially opportunities for us as students to dig a big hole. All right, so let me explain what I'm talking about, just so that I think it's important that we understand that what we do is relevant and what we do has meaning. So so when we study U.S. history in an AP class, and really this is probably part of the reason why you took this class, is you wanted to know more. You wanted to know more than just the bare essentials. Now, in an on-level, regular U.S. history class, that's exactly what, that's how the class is structured. In an on-level class, you don't dig deep holes. You don't get in, talk about deep holes, we don't get into, in an on-level class, the goal is not to really fully analyze an issue or fully analyze a topic, or to understand an issue at a very deep, meaningful level. So the approach that we take in this course is to dig deep post holes, the post hole approach. And one metaphor that I've used over the years is that we, either we are swimming in the kiddie pool, or we're swimming in the deep end. So essentially, in a kiddie pool, it's very hard to drown. The kiddie pool is very shallow. When you stand in a kiddie pool, for most of us, for some of us, the water, maybe if we're lucky, comes up to our knees. And so in this course, we do not swim in the kiddie pool. Our goal is to analyze history, to study history by trying to get some depth, some understanding, some deep understanding behind the issues and the events that we learn about, and therefore we swim in the deep end. And so we really want to get some depth in our understanding. Now, so today we took a reading quiz over 2 outside readings. We had, of course, they were both written by the same author, Mr. Nash. And so what I sought to do is to dig 2 deep holes when it comes to the Colonial America unit. And when we dig a deep hole, what we're really looking at is there's 2, each of those articles represents topics that I really want you to know about. Not on a kiddie pool level, but I want you to get some depth of understanding. We want to really fully analyze that issue. So, so for example, in the Nash, the first outside reading, which is the transformation of European society, we really want to do is analyze how the English colonists became transformed, how he changed due to his experience living in America. You know, how he is transformed from being a European to an American. You know, so you look at the outside reading. When you read our outside readings, first of all, look at how the essay is structured. And in that essay, it was structured in 3 parts. So the first part really analyzes in a great deal of detail the impact that land and the availability of land and the impact that had in transforming the Englishman into an American. You know, so one thing that throughout that section, Nash argues that because of the widespread availability of land, that the economic situation, the economic condition of the average English colonist was far superior than any of his contemporaries living in Europe or back home in England. And because of the greater degree of land ownership, that helped to fuel egalitarianism and equality. You know, it helped garner a climate of egalitarianism where that did not exist in Europe and back home in England. So so that should have been really the first theme, is addressing the issue of land and how the availability of land really helped transform English or American society, its economy, and its political structure. The second part deals with the hierarchy, the colonial social classes, and how even though the American colonies had distinctive social classes, it was far different than what we had in Europe. And of course, one of the major arguments that Nash makes is that you see a far more prominent middle class in the English colonies that you don't see back home in America. In fact, if you were to look at English society back home, you will find that the majority of the people living in England are small farmers who own 0 land. They're renters, they're tenant farmers. Whereas the majority of the people living in America, in the American colonies during the colonial period, were small farmers, but the difference is, because of the availability of land, they were owners. They owned their own land. And so that led to a greater degree of a middle class, of a middle class. So it really analyzes, the second part analyzes the social structure of the colonies and how the hierarchy, I've used kind of that metaphor of the triangle, the aristocrats at the top and as we move down to the peasantry, but that how, really you see a smaller degree of poverty and you see a larger element of a middle class in America than you don't find in England. And so we really, the article was designed to lead you into the understanding as to why, what caused that transformation. And the third transformation, and of course this is very much near and dear to my heart, and that is the Great Awakening. The Great Awakening was more than a religious movement, and that Nash argues that it transcended religion to influence social relationships It influenced economics, economic issues, as well as political issues as well. So, and so the Great Awakening really worked to also transform American colonists or English colonists into Americans, And so with the second Nash article with the Black people and white people's country, I really wanted to dig that you know, I really want to analyze the transatlantic slave trade, but rather than address it as you know, on a superficial level, rather than play in the kiddie pool, that article gives us the opportunity to really peel back the layers of the onion and see that the transatlantic slave trade was more than just the boat ride. It was more than just the Middle Passage. I wanted you to see, first of all, just the entire process of the slave trade, and you know, the act of actually going into the interior of Africa and kidnapping Africans, and deal with and you know, to the forced march to the ports and the loading onto the ships, and then of course the final stage of Middle Passage on board those cramped cesspools of slave ships, what they call the slavers. You know, you see that a lot, that word a lot, the slavers, those ships that were used to ship approximately anywhere from 11 to 15 million Africans to the New World. But you know, the article, you know, also addresses the issue of, you know, Nash really attacks this myth that that Africans were, you know, obviously when the Europeans ran across them, when Portuguese first ran across them, there is this perception that's out there that Africans were uncivilized. And because they were uncivilized, then that somehow excuses and makes okay the beginning of a slave trade, the beginning of that activity. But Nash does a really good job to explain that really, you know, Africa was extremely civilized, and that really the slave trade was a partnership between the rulers of these African kingdoms and the European countries. And so, again, it really gives us insight there, as well as, you know, really what was going on in the New World that made the need for African labor essential. And there were many different reasons, but really we want to understand the value of sugar, the importance of sugar as a factor, and really growing the African slave trade during the period 1 and period 2 of this APUSH course. So when you read the outside readings, make sure that you're reading for the big ideas. You'll notice that the questions on your quiz were not specific, that they were very broad, they were very general. Oftentimes students get swept up with, you know, trying to learn all the small little details in our outside readings. And that's not the important thing. APUSH is a big picture class. I want you to be able to see the big picture. Now, the small details are important because they help that story have meaning. But with our outside readings, the whole idea is to make sure that you've read. The quizzes are designed to hold you accountable and to ensure that what you're doing at home, that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing at home with your reading assignments. And so, anyway, I just want you to understand that these outside readings have meaning, and if you don't see the meaning right away, when you sit down to take that AP exam in May, you will understand exactly why most of our readings don't come out of the textbook, but rather through our outside readings. Okay, so that being said, I do want to talk about real briefly the exam next class. Now the exam will largely be modeled after the AP exam, and the fact that you're going to have multiple choice questions and you will have short answers. Okay, multiple choice questions and short answers. Now I know that we not yet have issued the textbooks. We will be issued our textbooks next week, but they're not necessary. They're not vital in order to score well and to be able to study for the AP exam. So for the AP exam, excuse me, for your exam next week, I apologize. So let's look at it. What do I need to use in order to study? What resources should I use? Okay, so what you'll need to do is, first of all, we have those PowerPoints that we went over in class. And of course, part of the PowerPoints, we tie in the lecture notes. Okay, I was able to finish all the lectures, address all the topics that need to be addressed. So you want to make sure that you have a good set of notes and allow the PowerPoints to kind of guide you in your studying. Okay, so we'll talk a bit here in a second about your note cards. Obviously, note cards for each unit exam, the note cards help you. At the end of the day, you're going to need to know some content. You're going to need to know some facts in order to get some questions right. All right. So the note cards, drill and kill those note cards, and understand those. What I try to tell kids over the past, and eventually students in APUSH get it. Remember, the first of everything we do in here probably won't be your best effort. Your first debate, your first jigsaw, your first reading quiz, and your first exam. Okay, just understand that by the time we get to April and May, students they do real well in the exams. Okay, they do real well. They learn how to manage their time better. They learn how to work harder, work smarter and not harder. They learn how to study. Their study skills improve. They know exactly. They look at trends on my exams, and they know exactly. They kind of figure out, hey, what do we need to know? Where do I need to spend my time when I study? So, I know there's always a level of anxiety going into exams, and I'm just saying it's going to be okay. All right. So, PowerPoints, note cards, your outside readings, and as well as the lecture notes, what we did in class. In a few minutes, I'll kind of just give you some pointers of some things you need to look at for the exam. And we also have, if you go to my website, if you go under the Colonial America page down at the bottom, we have what are called discussion questions. Okay, and it's those discussion questions that not only the AP exam is built around, but my exams. My exams will test content that the College Board believes is vital for you to know, okay? Because my goal is to prepare you for the AP test, okay? So if you have any questions about the exam and about what's happening next week, feel free to email me, and I'll be glad to. I'll return the email as soon as I get it. I will be out of town all weekend and will not be returning until Monday. So, but I will check my email from time to time. If you have an issue, let me know. Also, Monday on Labor Day at 8 o'clock in the evening, I will be doing my first Periscope review. Okay, Periscope. So Periscope is an app that you download on your cell phone, on your device, on your iPad, or whatever you have. And once you download it, you're going to find me, and you need to follow me. Okay, follow me. And so every time I go live on Periscope, we will be able to have an interface. I don't see you, but you will see me. But you will have the ability to, there we go, I'm typing. You'll be able to ask me questions, okay? And we'll review together. So if you, over the weekend, as you're reviewing for Colonial America, and you've got a question, there's just something that you're confused about, or whatever issue you have, then write those questions down and be sure to ask me when I'm on Periscope. So that'll be at 8 o'clock, okay? And when I go live, you should get a reminder on your phone. Your phone should actually ding. It'll make a noise. I think it's like a whistle, like that. It'll like do a little whistle. It'll whistle at you. That basically lets you know that I'm going live on Periscope. Now, Periscope is also partnered with Twitter. So if you follow me on Twitter, you will get a Twitter warning. You'll get a Twitter, not a warning, but you'll get a notification from Twitter that I am up and going and live. And if you missed the review, you could always go back and watch it. So those sessions stay on there forever. So you'll be able to go back and watch it. So last but not least, what I'd like to look at today with you is Colonial America. And let me just kind of steer you in the direction of where I should be looking over the weekend in my preparations for the exam. Number one, I talked a lot about, and you should have picked up on this in our discussions and our lectures in class, that the development of a distinct, unique American identity, okay, where colonial Englishmen become Americans. Now, ask yourself the question, what does the word American mean? All right, so, I mean, we read that outside reading, The Transformation of European Society. How were Europeans transformed into Americans? And so eventually, by the end of period 2, 1754, English colonists have a distinctive, unique identity that is different from their countrymen back home in England, in the British Isles. So one area that we want to focus on in the development of a distinctive American identity is the one thing that made us Americans is that from day one, from the moment we stepped foot in North America, the English began to give themselves liberty and freedoms that they did not have back home in England. So what do? I get my note cards, okay, and I pull out individual examples of American liberty, whether they be religious liberties, political liberties, economic liberties, but giving themselves liberties that they don't have for it. We talked about with Anne Hutchinson and Roger Williams, the right to dissent, to speak out, to disagree, the development of free speech, the development of free religion. The Quakers developed a tradition of religious toleration. We see for example, the Maryland Act of Toleration for the colony of Maryland. The John Peter Zinger case, that's a note card term that deals with the development of a free press, freedom of the press. So what I'd like for you to think about is the development of liberty during the period. The second area is the second that the colonists, the English, stepped off the boat and landed in America, they began to develop democracy, democratic traditions, and democratic institutions. So what do? Take out my note cards and I pull out examples of the development of democracy, democratic institutions, and democratic ideals. So the Maryland Act of Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, Mayflower Compact, the Town Hall Meeting, House of Burgesses. So all of these deal with the gradual development of democracy and institutions. And so by the time we get to the end of period 2, colonial Americans have been slowly developing self-government, right? And that's a huge development. Okay. So another area we want to look at are examples of regional identity. Okay, so as the colonies are founded, we have the 3 regions, right? We have the 3 regions. So with the regions, what we want to do, so with New England, and the middle colonies, the mid-Atlantic colonies, right? And the south, right? Southern colonies, the Chesapeake. Remember Chesapeake? The Virginia and Maryland. Okay. So what I would do is I would draw a Venn diagram, okay, at home. And I would draw a number of them. Okay. And I would put differences here and put similarities in here. Okay. And when you do the differences and similarities, I mean, you're analyzing a lot of different areas. How are they similar and different in their economy, their government, their religion, you know, how they treated women, women's rights, the role of women, literacy, geography, because geography really determines their economy. You're looking at their treatment of Indians, you know, how they treated Indians, their relations with Indians. So create categories of analysis and then compare them, okay? And then compare them. And that's something I can do at home, is work on comparing the various regions and know that each region had an identity. And don't forget Albion Seed. Albion Seed, that jigsaw, remember that each group, that really those four major groups that came to America brought with them a different identity, a different concept of liberty, that kind of morphed together to form, you know, what we have today. So the three, now when you look at the three regions of the colonies, you don't need to know each individual colony. However, take one of those colonies from each region and just make sure you know it very well. So with New England, I would probably pick Massachusetts and just, I'm not saying know everything about it, but really focus on all the major events and happenings and their religion, politics, economy, all of, yeah, with that one colony. Pennsylvania, the Holy Experiment, I would focus on Pennsylvania. Pull out the note card terms that deal with Pennsylvania. And in the South, I would focus on the Chesapeake colonies of Maryland and Virginia, you know. And so rather than know them all, know those really, really well, okay? Know those really, really well. So in the Colonial America unit, other areas I would look at exploration. Why did the Spanish come here? Why did the French come here? Dutch, Portuguese, and of course the English. You know, so compare and contrast those. The role of women. I mean, you know, we want to focus on that. There will be some questions about women. I'm operating without my notes right now, so I'm just kind of talking off the top of my head. How is America different from Europe? So as we approach the end of period 2, okay, we have some very important developments that occur. Okay, first of all, I remember one you need to look at: examples of colonial unity, examples of times in which colonists came together, even though they were different, you know, but I mean, they really didn't have a whole heck of a lot in common. But examples of colonial unity, right? Examples of colonial unity. And the big one, of course, is the First Great Awakening. As you know in class, I made a huge deal out of the Great Awakening. So make sure you understand that. There's a really good document, a one-pager, that's on the Colonial America page on my website. Might want to look at that. That's pretty cool. It's a pretty good deal. So to know the Great Awakening, know who their leaders were. I mean, it was a very important revolution of sense. And so what were these ministers revolting against, and what impact did it have? I mean, I know we we read about the Great Awakening in one of our outside readings, but please make a big deal out of the Great Awakening. Great Awakening is very important. But also, this is something I didn't get to in class, but understand the economic relationship between England and the colonies was a policy called mercantilism, right? Mercantilism. And the Parliament will pass laws. This is a note card term. In fact, I think I put these two terms together, called the Navigation Acts. And the Navigation Acts were designed. So mercantilism means it's a policy in which, an economic policy in which the colonies exist to benefit the mother country. The colonies exist to benefit the mother country. And so in order to ensure this, the Parliament passes a series of laws called the Navigation Acts. The Navigation Acts essentially made it illegal for the American colonists to trade with anyone else but England. And they decided in the 1710s that the colonies are actually going to make more money for the crown and for the mother country if they're left alone, you know. So if they kind of take the shackles off of them and let the colonists engage in the economy with very little interference. That's called salutary neglect. Salutary neglect. So for 50 years, from roughly 1710 or 1713 or so to 1760, the English crown, 1763 is when it officially ends. The English government is leaving, is essentially allowing the colonies to run their own affairs. And it's probably the worst thing they could have done, because the Americans during that 50-year period, when left alone, realized, hey, I don't need England anymore. We can do this by ourselves. And of course, it was during salutary neglect that the Great Awakening happened. And also it was during salutary neglect that we see the beginning of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is a political philosophy, not just a political philosophy, but an intellectual philosophy that, in a nutshell, we're really going to, don't worry about the Enlightenment for this exam, but it's important to note that at the time, as we're moving from period 2 to period 3, Americans are beginning to question monarchy. You know, they're big believers of self-government, Republican government, democratic government, and they're beginning to question, these intellectuals are beginning to question monarchy, the nature of government, natural rights, where do our rights come from? And that's kind of the, sets the stage for the next act, which is revolution and the movement towards revolution. Examples of colonial rebellions, that's something also you need to look at. Of course, you know what the big one is Bacon's Rebellion. And not only Bacon's Rebellion, along with the rebellions, make sure you, something we spend a great deal of time, and I want to emphasize, is the labor systems, the various labor systems, you know, this transition from using indentured servants to African slaves from Africa. So, but the labor issues are, that's a pretty important one. So anyway, so use the rest of the class to finish up what needs to be finished. And you know, like I said, have a great weekend. And we're going to again, we're gonna get this test knocked out next class. Periscope at 8 o'clock. Periscope at 8 o'clock. Make sure you tune in and have questions ready, because if you guys don't have any questions, any review questions, and if you're just assuming someone else is going to ask questions, I mean, make sure you have questions, because if you don't, it will be a very short review. It'll be a very short review. So join Remind 101. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Periscope, because, and I think this is the third time I've said it, for us to be successful this year, we have to have an open line of communication. I've got to be able to contact, I got to have an open line of contact with you. So I respect your time, and but at the same time, we've got to have that. So let's make sure we take care of business, and look ahead on your calendars, because as soon as we are done with Colonial America, we're jumping right into the dawn of the revolution. So let's start looking ahead. Notecards, Founding Brothers. You should already have that copy of that book. If you don't have it yet, or if that book hasn't been ordered on Amazon or whatever, then you are behind. You are behind. So let's get that book and let's start knocking it out. Do not wait till the last minute. That is not a book you want to binge read, because it is heavy. It's heavy. So get it and let's get going. Okay. I'm really proud of you guys. I want you to have a wonderful weekend, and I will chit chat at you later.